We are live once again on our
Live again.
Friday. Welcome to the AWE Digital Wellness Podcast. And today we have a special guest, Phil Ritter, Director of Flow Neuroscience, based in Sweden, the company, but Phil is in the Germany, Switzerland, and Austria region. And the products are worldwide. What are you guys doing? I heard you're helping people that are depressed. Isn't that a good thing?
Yes, that is a good thing. Good. Thank you for having me. What Flow is we are a pretty revolutionary piece of technology that is operating within the UK as well as the EU and in the Americas as a at-home depression treatment, which uses TDCS as a technology to essentially treat depression at home. This is all backed by studies.
I'm going to stop you for the audience. First of all, happy Halloween, everyone. This is not my Friday.
Halloween. And Phil is not related to me for anybody who's asking.
Oh, yeah, no.
Not my long lost brother, but we are just friends who happen to have the same name. Maybe we're related, but I don't know.
So TDCS, right? So I know that it's transcranial direct cranium stimulation, but to the audience, maybe they don't even know what that is. So this is a TDCS, right? This is why I'm wearing this.
So I think TDCS looks a little bit more like this, right?
Oh,
it's out of the box here. But essentially it's based off of a growing belief and growing science within the therapeutic and psycho community in terms of how to treat mental health by looking at what we call neuromodulation. So for most people, they've heard of chemical imbalances as being the source of mental health problems such as depression or ADHD, and that's certainly ways to treat it, and there's truth in that. But as research has shown over the last 5 to 6 decades, going back even a little bit further than that, we're now seeing that with TDCS and things like TMS and RTMS, which has been around for a little bit longer, we're able to essentially reactivate certain neural patterns within the brain to allow your brain cells to kind of rediscover connections that they may have unlearned or forgotten about. I think in layman's terms, the best way I try to explain it to people that don't want the whole scientific explanation is it almost encalcifies the connections between your brain that after years and years of choosing a certain direction and thinking, you might have forgot exists and the brain subconsciously can't even access. So what TDCS does is use a very, very gentle brain stimulation to essentially kind of use the brain's natural language, which is electricity, to re-stimulate.
But it's not the crazy electroshocks.
No, that would be EKT, and that definitely also works, but it's a lot more invasive.
Yeah, there is some, especially treatment resistant depression, that actually we still use that in clinical settings. So, we're talking about brain wiring. You have a great technology, and I would say that there's many ways, like we talked about before, neuroplasticity. There's a lot of ways to change your brain, to change your behavior, to change the way you feel. And to some people, it can be done by CBT, right? So like thinking about it, some people might be more emotional. Some people need to do some actions. What's the best use case and how does it work for, like, which types of people would be best suited for this device?
Okay, no, that's a good point. So TDCS has been studied significantly since around the turn of the century. Most major studies started coming out in around 2012, 2013, which is when our founders really started getting invested in this topic. At the core of it, it does both CBT and using something like a TDCS or TMS. It all really just based on the same theory, which is that we have the ability to retrain our brain. One is just using an external stimulation. The other one is from an intrinsic motivation as well as habit forming. So for us, we kind of see both things go hand in hand. Flow's mission has always been to make depression treatment very available to everybody. So we actually don't discriminate between whether somebody wants to use it at home by themselves or they want to use it in conjunction with their doctor if they're already doing CBT, or they could perhaps be doing a round of antidepressants and they want to use it to either get off the antidepressants or enhance the factors. So for Flow, it's always been very much a B2B and D2C play together. And so for us, we see that I don't think you can do one without the other. And even though that we have this device that you put on your head, I'll put it on at some point, or I'll show you what it guys looks like, right? So you'll look a little bit like this, and then it basically stimulates for 30 seconds, but it goes hand in hand with an app. And this app basically has CBT built into it, and therapeutic exercises and videos and ways of thinking differently, because it's so vital that you also make changes in your lifestyle to change the external stimuli that's coming in so that you can also have a different way of approaching things, right? You need to reinforce the new habits that you want to learn, so you actually have to do them, right? And a device isn't going to be the sole reason that that's going to happen.
So that's a good segue, Mark. You are a CBT therapist, pretty expert, and AWE is developing something. So can you tell how we use it, perhaps in the normal way, and how we might be using it in the future as a digital therapeutics?
Sure. So first of all, I completely agree with you, Phil, that there's not like one solution that solves all the problems. Very comprehensive, and CBT alone it's very helpful, but it might not solve depression, anxiety, ADHD for every person who does it. And on the other hand, like, I agree with what you said, that perhaps just using the device by itself is not going to simply cure the depression either, but it's really a combination approach. People say traditionally that the highest succession rate for ameliorating depression in studies is a combination of CBT and SSRIs. And I think perhaps slowly you're seeing these devices, starting to take over the role that SSRIs once occupied. And so talk therapy is still very, very important. But in the age of technology, it can be difficult for a person to find access to a therapist, affordable therapist, even getting a therapist to be in person with you. And so there are technological solutions, but again, we want to make sure that we're not aggravating the problem by further isolating people and further causing them to fall into these bad habits. Like you said, a lot of depression, this might be something controversial, is that it is mostly a result of negative habits, either negative thought patterns or negative behaviors that people engage in, and that people sometimes are unconsciously keeping themselves in, right? And perhaps this is where the device that Flow's developing can not recalcify, but decalcify a lot of these neural pathways that will make it easier to change behavior. You can do this too with CBT. It might just take longer, right? If you just do CBT alone, if you see a therapist 1 hour a week for 2 years, 3 years, you can achieve that result. It's like meditation or Xanax. Both things are going to relax you, but one thing will have a much more immediate outcome than the other thing. So to your question, Christian, yeah, we are developing a device as well at AWE. It's a phone. It's a smartphone. I can show you that the battery is currently dead. It is a Samsung phone. We've developed all the OS operating system for this. And we've designed it in a way that uses operant conditioning to reward people for good behavior. So if you read a book, right, the phone senses not necessarily that you're reading a book, but that you've laid it on a flat surface. It will reward you with like 10, 15 minutes of time on YouTube, Reddit, TikTok, Instagram, whatever app that you want to use. There we go.
You have the
There it is right there. Halloween special. No, I'm just kidding. But no, devices can be used but the ultimate outcome is to influence behavior in some way and to change habits and to perhaps, change a lot of the way that we interpret certain events in our life. Like girl dumping you, really heartbreaking, but somebody who's been dumped 10 times, it can also be really heartbreaking, but perhaps they've developed some, tolerance to that. And over time, a lot of it is about, changing habits and behaviors here. So I would say to both of you, it's a very comprehensive approach where a device can be very complementary to something like talk therapy.
Thanks for that. And, can you also tell me, Phil, what type of CBT is included or perhaps available with Flow Neuroscience?
Yeah, I mean, the nice thing is we've actually made the app like free to use and download without the device, so anybody can go check it out. It should be
Nice.
on iOS and Android. I think for the most part, the CBT, so the cognitive behavioral therapy, for those that have been heard us using this acronym and not explaining what it means,
Yeah,
essentially it's a guide, right?
SSRIs are also pharmaceutical for people, right? SSRIs are pharmaceutical.
ECDS, CBT, SSRI.
We should have a little ticker at the bottom or a cheat sheet at the end with all, all the random acronyms that we use. No, I think at the end of the day, what we're doing is almost for a separate purpose, or two paths to the same end goal. What we find is that we specialize. So again, I think with depression and other mental health, but let's focus on depression for a moment. This is done by your prefrontal cortex, right? We know this, the executive center, right? But it also controls things, and also is noticeable when you have things like anxiety or ADHD. It's motivation, it's your sleep quality, and all of these things work in harmony together to improve your overall well-being and your ability to execute on what you want to do. So with CBT is phenomenal for making you aware of what sleep patterns am I having, right? There's also connected devices that come into play in this form, but it just makes you aware of, okay, am I going to bed at 1 o'clock every morning, right? Am I not going to bed before midnight? When am I waking up? How's my eating habits doing? So these are things that are part of becoming a healthy and balanced human. However, lots of times with depressed people, especially once you start getting into those moderate and severe depression scalas, what ends up happening is they're just unable, you hear it the most, and they're unable to make that first big change. And so you hear it a lot of times that depressed people will say, like, you know what, I just can't get out of bed, or I find it so hard to answer a phone. And a moderate and mild might just be, you know what, I have a really hard time answering friends when they write me on WhatsApp for whatever reason, right? So for us, we see flow as the neuromodulation portion of it really helps people kind of rediscover those neural pathways. It allows them to take the first steps, and then it manifests itself, because once they start going and then they clean the kitchen for the first time, they're like, wow, I have this in me. And of course, now you've done a positive association with something that you've done, which you probably haven't felt in a while. And that releases dopamine again. And so you're starting to build little feedback loops, but in a positive sense, right? And I think it was the author, was it Raphael Taylor or something, who wrote the book around nudging, and how we all need to learn how to be a little bit better in nudging into the positive sense, and using these dark patterns that exist to kind of go into a negative light by using them in a positive sense, right?
Well, that's something that you can do sometimes with talk therapy or coaching, but sometimes it's disabled by something, right? So drugs can be a solution. This seems a bit less invasive than ingesting things in your body. It just tickles your brain with a little electricity. Sounds cool.
Yeah. I should clarify that we've treated over 50,000 patients at this point, right? It's used by the NHS in the UK, because I do know that new technology like this, it does sound crazy, and I'll be the first to admit that I thought it sounded very crazy when I first heard about it as well. But it is being used by the NHS. We've got around 1,800 clinics that are actually using it, a couple thousand doctors. The worst side effects that we get are usually kind of just a little bit of skin irritation or a mild headache, which if you compare that to SSRIs is, I think anybody who's ever taken antidepressants would rather have a little bit of a headache than the side effects that come with SSRIs.
Well, we talked about, and yes, I'm aware of this technology for a long time. It's actually old and next generation technology. It's been used, it's been clinically approved. You have a Class 2A medical license, right?
That's right.
So yeah, those are actually working, safe device. But to look at worse alternative, maybe chemical is. We talked about electric shock for treatment resistant, but I was in a conference a couple months ago where there was a researcher from New York. I think they had 12 clinical clients, a new technology, which is a deep brain electrode. But those were people that had 6 to 7 years of untreatable or treatment-resistant depression. And so that's a little bit more invasive than what you just put on your head, I think, right? So they put it deeply in your brain, as it's called. But it is also technology that work for the worst and worst case. you want to prevent it, you want to help it, you want to make it as easy as possible, but there's some case that you really need some invasive devices. And the patient that hadn't been smiling or happy for years, out of the 12 patients, I think 11 were super happy and the other one was good and still alive. So yeah, I mean, just people saying I was never happy for years, and then technology enabled, even though it's invasive in some case, it can be helpful for the population that need it, right?
Yeah, and I think for the most part, I think it's just as we're talking about all these various different treatments, I just wanted to make it very clear that I don't think that there's one very good one or the only one. I think for everybody out there and anybody who feels depressed and is watching this or thinks that they might be dealing with depression, and it could be mild, right? Mild is fine. People have mild depressions. You don't need to be ashamed of it. It's like a sprained ankle. You're still going to go to the doctor for it. So as these levels go up and down, you may also feel the need to have certain therapies, which may be a little bit more intense or less intense. But it doesn't matter. It doesn't mean that one is better than the other in the end. I do think that at the end of the day, people should seek help in the first and foremost, and then take a look at what's out there and do try the things that are the easiest. And I think CBT, any therapist will tell you, should be part of that. And everything else is listen to your doctor or also see what's out there for you that makes sense. So I just, at this point, I think we should just also make sure that anybody listening understands that the first and most important thing is to open up, seek help, and be open to help.
Thanks, Phil. That's a very important point. And talking about CBT, we are also going to be presenting a CBT-based model, AI model. AWE will be presenting a 12-minute talk at the Canadian Psychological Association in November.
Oh, wow.
And we'll be also at the Society for Neuroscience in San Diego in November as well. So
cool.
if you guys are around, you want to seek some cool CBT with AI. What do you think about AI, Phil? I know you're not a proponent of AI in general, but we're trying to use AI and tech for good, and we're really using the algorithms to do what Mark said. Right now, between the sessions of CBT, there's people that are seeing a therapist 1 hour every week. What can you do in between? And we always want to have the human component, and never say to people, use AI as a therapist. That's not the idea.
I guess my gripe with AI is mostly that it's mismarketed and it's not the right name for it. It is not artificial intelligence. It's a large language model that's just gotten a lot better than the large language models that we've had before. And so what LLMs do is they do find or try to find the perfect response, the perfectly average response or median response to essentially the question that's being asked. So if you are somebody who has a good understanding of a topic, I think AI could be extremely strong in helping you figure out kind of the nitty gritty and being able to judge whether or not an answer is good or not, right? So I think their AI can play a very powerful tool, especially in the clinician's hands, where they can use it to aggregate data and basically be able to call out if they see anything that's looking a little bit odd, because we do know AI makes mistakes. I think as long as you have human control and safeguards in place, I think AI can be really, really valuable. It is a pattern identification tool. It's very strong for that, right? So let's use it for that in terms of analysis and determining if there's any sort of signal. So as we start getting into a more connected world where everybody's wearing their wearables, I've Apple watches or Pixel watches or whatever. Samsung's got Galaxy. I'm doing a lot of branding for them here, but or the Oura Ring is really popular here in Germany, for example. The Whoop band, it's like very, very popular as well. So people are interested in figuring out what kind of data they have on themselves. But at the end of the day, somebody's got to do something with that data without causing panic in our people who are seeing all these various things or these data points and don't know what to do with it, right? We don't want to make sure these wearables are doing something positive for us and not just causing us to have another reason to be anxious about a certain value not being a certain level. So I think for AI, it's very important that we integrate it in a smart way and we keep the human control.
Yeah, I think on top of that as well, we're not quite sure what's happening with the data that's collected or biometric data, right? A lot of the people don't realize that when they use ChatGPT and they type something in, that data is online. It's searchable, right? It's on the search engine, and the big fear I think there is that it could be used by advertisers to perhaps create much more granular targeting if they know exactly what hours you're sleeping based on a Oura Ring device that you're wearing, or your REM cycles, or whatever, they can use extremely biometric data to basically know much more about you than you essentially know about yourself, and be able to market products to you that you perhaps don't want in the first place. I think that's a fear that some people have.
Yeah, you bring up an excellent point, and that would be is I think we'd all be very upset if our insurances were starting to track what our sleep schedules were like, and if we're not getting the right amount of sleep, which everyone has said, most doctors will agree, is one of the number one causes for ailments and age. If we're not getting the right amount of sleep, our premiums go up. But I do think I would be welcome if they had an integration with my fitness app, and they said, "Oh, well, Phil's going to the gym 5 times a week. Let's bring that premium down a little bit, right? Let's give them a little something back." So I think we need to see how businesses can use this in a positive sense, in an ethical sense. But we all know on this call, and I think most people watching here, that most insurance companies will probably not be so eager to lower premiums based on data. So I do think that we just have to figure out what the ethical way to do that is.
By the way, this is a live discussion, so if anyone has any comments for Phil or the rest of the panel, please feel free to type them. We'll try to ignore them. No, that's not true. We'll respond with pleasure. Ask a question. So we talked a lot about depression, guys. I'm starting to be depressed. It's Halloween. It's Friday. Can we talk about something else? so let's switch a bit the topic and say, well, we're talking about the brain, right? The brain is a beautiful thing, and the brain has pathways. So we talked about our company's awe, right? We can create awe moments, and your brain can actually learn to have more awe in every day, right? So one of the things that we do is digital resets, and it helps reset your brain, right? And that's not talk therapy. It's just get on a call with Mark that's going to massage your mind with his words, and tell you good stories for 25 minutes, and then make you feel awe, right? Mm-hmm. And what would be that alternative in terms of what can flow neuroscience do for people that want to have better experience? Or we talked about what we do is mainly looking and reminding people that they're addicted a little bit or a lot to technology, or that they may be, or use technology more intentionally. But those things are very addicted, right? So porn use, social media use, gambling, all those things. So that's kind of an addiction that, we know the reasons of the brain, nucleus accumbens, and all that stuff. We won't bore the audience. But what can we do with technology like yours to also help those types of addictions?
Yeah, I mean, I think with phones and everything that's coming towards us now, I think I was watching a very interesting YouTube video from CoffeeZilla. I don't know if you know him, but he had a very good deep dive into basically how everything has turned into gambling nowadays. And essentially, I would argue he's very on the money about these things. I think the Europeans might have a little bit more of a law in place to safeguard these. But if you look at the stats in terms of what's gambling is happening here, what social media usage is looking like here, it's quite alarming, right? The younger generation in particular is spending a lot of time on it. And I myself find myself addicted to anything algorithmic. You just have to be careful, right? So for us, I think it's important to take a look at or make a distinction between how we use the technology. And if you're not paying for it, you're the product. You're not paying for Instagram, you're the product for the advertisers, right? Same with Facebook, same with TikTok. You can look at something like a Duolingo, which everybody would argue is one of the most addictive and gamified apps out there, right? You look at the streak memes that are out there, but I'm not trying to hate on Duolingo here, but I don't know too many people who have spoken very confidently that it's taught them a second language or a third language. I think it's gotten them to a good streak, but it's not really teaching. So the app itself would prefer that you stay on the app, right? More advertising dollars, more engagement, buy for the premiums. So I think that if you keep that in mind, and you can have a healthy understanding that if you are being engaged and if you are giving your time to something and you are not receiving anything in return for that, except for maybe a little dopamine boost, then you're the product. So you need to be on your toes, and you need to recognize these patterns, because like anybody will tell you, Apple, Tinder, it's Match Group, right? They're the ones. These guys have armies of UX designers, and those are the people. Like, you have to understand that every time you open this app, it's like 15 of them versus you, right? 15 of them have designed every little thing to make it as addicting as possible, to get you the maximum amount of engagement, to keep you on, and it's just you. And so things that you guys, for example, the Awe app or the Awe phone that you guys are doing, and your general approach to the whole thing is to basically be kind of cognizant of what's going on, first off, and second of all, is equipping you to start fighting back in a way that, you know, kind of evens the playing field. It's 10 against 1. What are you going to do? Well, okay, let's bring it back down to a one-on-one situation, for example. And especially with things like Flow, it does, like I said, it's all about the executive center. But most people, look, I'll be the first to admit it, I use this thing because I, first of all, like the way that it works on the ADHD side of things. So there's certain symptoms that also are surrounding depression, which is like concentration, anxiety, mood, emotionale Teilhabe, what is that in English? Like emotional commitment, I guess, or emotional kind of being there, being in the moment. And I have to make it clear that Flow is right now is a designated depression treatment. However, those symptoms that hang out on the outside of depression, like the ones that I just mentioned, those are also positively impacted. And as any therapist will tell you, is that those questions and taking a look at how your concentration and sleep and anxiety levels are, those are included in the MADRS scala, which is what a therapist will use to determine whether or not you have severe, moderate, or mild depression, right? So we track these things and we can see that the folks that are using Flow are seeing major gains there. And so for us, what we see is that it does give you, especially we talk about patterns, if you're just so far into the scrolling or doom scrolling or habit forming every time you pick up the phone, Flow could give you that nudge that you need to basically be like, oh, you know, I remember a time when I didn't find YouTube that interesting to scroll through. I thought it was more interesting to see what's outside or what my friends were doing and having those conversations. And if you ask me, I think we're going to see a large shift, in large part thanks to AI kind of taking over the internet as we know it, of people seeking those connections. I think you guys are going to give them the tools to do that. So I think this is kind of also the right time to have this conversation, because I think people are going to want to find the real connections again offline.
Well, thanks, Phil. And I think like we said, you know, the first thing is realize that, you know, your mental health is at stake, right? I always explain to people, we talked about, you know, going to the gym, right? So you get points from your insurance if you go to the gym, maybe, right? But do you get points if you take a digital reset? Because, right, you're preventing your mental health degrading every day with all the devices, all the stress, all the, you know, high-paced life that we're living. And that's taking a toll on people's mental and physical health, right?
Yeah.
So, and I think the first thing is to realize that maybe you don't have, like, maybe it's mild, like you said, right? Maybe you don't have, and maybe it's fine. But, you know, we always talked about the preventative approach, right? We don't want to be there when it's too late, because we know that, you know, one of the number one killer in the world is suicide, right? So that's too late. You cannot help and prevent when you're there, right? So how can you find a way to proactively always nurture it, like your body, with good food, with good training, with good exercise, but for your mind, right? So you can have a device that helps you stimulate and knows where and how to stimulate, or we can have, you know, a mix of all those things that are creating the same, you know, holistic preventive approach to wellness, right? So thanks for doing your part in that, and Flow and neuroscience is part of our friends now, right? So there's so many tools that we, but I don't have the last name as you guys, so I'm sorry, but we'll figure it out. Maybe I'll ask to marry one of you, and then we'll all have the same last name.
Exactly.
So just to come back to kind of the responsibility of tech, we talked about AI, right? So what can we do when we're creating technology? And we all kind of share the same dream of using technology for good. But what does that mean concretely? How can we be responsibly making and using technology?
Yeah. I would say, like I mentioned the book earlier, but Richard Thaler, I believe it's pronounced, the book Nudge, really, it looks at, so we all know dark patterns, right? And if you don't know, if you're watching what these are, dark patterns are essentially psychological hacks or tricks that are used by marketers, by apps, services, anybody that would like to make a sale off of you is going to be looking into using these patterns. These could be brighter buttons. This could be gamification, right? You get a badge if you've done something 7 days in a row. Taking currency and putting it against something else. So instead of betting actual money, you're betting banana coins, and banana coins aren't real, but somehow you have to pay for them, right? But you don't think of that in the moment, right? So these dark patterns exist. What his argument is that we know what dark patterns are, and we can use these for good, right? We can use these for good. And if your head is in the right place and your ethics are in the right place, then there are people out there, and there are companies and businesses, psychiatrists, therapists, doctors, NGOs. They can make use of these dark patterns and turn them into light patterns, right? By nudging them into the positive. So you're basically saying, like, I'll use the flow example is we have a schedule. The schedule, again, I think we could be better in terms of how we're nudging users, but we do kind of do this thing where we've got a community, especially if you're involved in the clinic side of things, the doctor have an input in, or can see whether or not you're actually doing the stimulations, but you also feel a sense of accomplishment for doing your part and finishing the therapy, because you'll see this thing where it's like grayed out if you haven't done it, and you get like an X, and it doesn't feel very good, but it feels better if you do it, right? So I think similar to you, it's basically the question should be, how can businesses learn to basically use these dark patterns for good? And then it really just opens up more of a conversation around ethics in medical device and medical practices, balancing the interest of the patient versus the interest of growth, which you're always going to need one or the other in order to kind of further development. You guys are obviously putting time into this. So the phone comes at a cost, right? Flow costs money, but it's also used so that we can further research into other activities that TDCS may impact, like anxiety and ADHD. So I think it becomes less of a question. I think we should all focus on how can we use these patterns for good, and then how do we balance patient care and patient benefit with the interest also of the company's need to grow, I would say.
Excellent take, Phil. And we talk about two things, right? So psychology is the same for pretty much every human. Yes, you can be neurodivergent, but we have the same brain. And then technology, once it's out, it's kind of the same until you have a patent for many people. How can you use the same psychology and same technology for good? Because you can use it for money or other purposes, or attention, or even worse, or you can use, warfare is using psychology and technology
Yeah.
as well, right, guys? So, and how can you use those same things for good? Mark?
I'm curious about why it's more common for businesses to use these dark patterns. Is it that there's a more immediate return there on their investment than perhaps using light patterns, and in trying to encourage better behavior with a more delayed outcome, i.e. more delayed return on their investment? Why is it more common nowadays for the dark patterns?
I mean, I would assume that the negative bias is more common than the
That makes
positivity
sense.
bias, right? So the positive bias exists, but normally it's only in the form of I'm more important than others. So I'm positive, not every day, but normally I think my life is more important than others, and I'm important in the world, which is not, unfortunately, or fortunately. Once you realize that, actually you're happier. But then the negativity bias is like survival, right? So, and then when you use that psychology against people, you're making them do things that they will react without using their prefrontal lobe cortex, when they're using the amygdala pathways, the fear pathways. So that's why I think it's more
But I mean,
effective.
we can also introduce this right now. I mean, I think if you recognize what dark pattern, it's an education question, if you ask me. If we are able to teach what these dark patterns are, you can also teach people to use them for good, right? So we do this. I mean, your phone is based off of this. I know this. But in another example is, let's just say I'm not a morning person, right? Like, I'm not a morning person. I've been trying to go to the gym in the morning. It's just not me. I'm having a hard time. So what do? Is if I wake up in the morning, and I go to the gym, that's the only time I'm allowed to have takeaway coffee. If I don't go to the gym in the morning, I have to have coffee I make at home. And my machine's not that great. So it's not like a fun time, right? So by doing this every time, you kind of like Pavlovian response mechanism yourself into doing the things that are good for you, right? And I think as long as you kind of can teach people that, we've done this with social media, has done a terrible job of this, because you're always comparing yourself to everybody else. But really what you should be comparing yourself to is Phil Bart from a day ago or a week ago. How are you faring now, right? Like, how is that going for you?
Comparing myself to my
Yes.
dream self.
So I think there is really is it's more of an educational piece really on and telling people this. And I think once they start seeing these patterns, is like, okay, well, what does it really make you feel good? Do the likes on Instagram really fulfill that need? Or is it better if you're going to have a conversation with your grandma for the first time in like 2 weeks where you're actually listening? And after a while, I think you start recognizing where you really get your value from. And I'm sure there's an age component to it as well. We kind of age into also seeing what's important to us and having a moment of self-reflection, hopefully. But I do think that those are components of it. And I think that what you guys are doing or what Flo is doing, why psychiatrists are psychiatrists, is to remind people that they do have the tools available. They might have just forgotten.
Yeah, my fear here is that if you compare social media addiction to something like fast food, I would imagine that most people understand that fast food is unhealthy. Yet at macro scale, most people still, well, not most people, but lots of people still go and eat fast food despite knowing the consequences of it, with America being.
Uh-oh.
Oh, someone got censored.
Big pharma.
The fast food industry.
Yeah, Ronald McDonald just said nope. You're mute.
We can't hear you, Mark. Still muted.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Seems like my camera died. Ronald McDonald shut it down right at the where things are getting interesting. But I think even despite people being aware of the consequences of eating fast food, they still do it at a macro scale. That people's awareness does not influence their behavior because it's accessible, it's easy to go there, it's cheap for lots of people, and people might recognize like, oh yeah, social media is like, it's bad, waste my time. But like, I don't think they take it very seriously, and that it's reflected in their behavior. People use their phones on average 5 to 6 hours per day, and they're like, yeah, no, I could be doing something else. But they only, I think it's because the consequences, like with fast food, they're very long term, right? So it's like over the years, you'll see like, okay, all the opportunity cost of having stayed in on a Friday night on Tinder instead of going out to a bar and meeting somebody, as opposed to, just an easy meal, going to McDonald's and I'm not worrying about it. You see these effects over time. And I think it's our human nature to immediately respond to immediate stimuli in our environment, right? And I think that's the big challenge here, is right, despite the awareness and the education, that people still might just stay with the same behavior.
I mean, I think.
Well, I think it's not real enough for them because they see everyone else doing it. It's also normalized, right? So, oh, my friend's on their phone, I'm on the phone, the guy on the street's on the phone, the guy's in the metro, the guy in the car is on the phone, almost going to crash and kill someone. But that's normal, right? Oh, well, you have laws that you cannot drive with the phone. Sure, now, but do people do? Yeah, you see them every day, right? And then you don't see them because they crash and die. I think I was talking to someone about the statistics of people dying from using their phone is more than drunk driving now. It's crazy, right? So, and then because it is like drinking, it's an addiction, right? But people don't want to talk about it because they don't see the consequence, right? And we want to kind of give that awareness that you might not see it until you're crunched out, and then because of your neck, and then your sleep pattern because of the blue light. And so there's physical dangers, and then there's mental danger, which we talked about, right? So isolation, depression, anxiety, ADHD, ADD, all linked to use. Even moderate use increase all those mildly, right? And excessive use, we know where that goes, right? And
I was just gonna say, like, to Mark's point, I think what we also can't forget is that we're not that long into this. Social media wasn't this bad. Like, sure, there was some problems, and I'm going to age myself here, but back in the MySpace days, your biggest headache was who was in your top 8. If you're too young to know what this is, just Google it. But essentially, even Facebook in the beginning, when the feed was happening, it used to be that it was chronological, right? You would have a reason to go on to check what the news was and what the updates were. It wasn't driven to keep you there all the time. But if you look at the business models of these companies, because again, we go back, and again, I'm a guy who's responsible for the commercial success of Flow in Germany, in Switzerland and Austria. So again, my role also includes marketing. And so these platforms just present themselves a great opportunity for businesses to get the word out. But they've essentially, what they've done is they've stopped catering towards you, the user, and they're catering towards me, the advertiser. And so we call this enshittification. But these algorithmic changes on Instagram and Facebook, these are recent. This was 2018 or 17, maybe. Like, we're only 6 to 7 years into this. And now we're seeing the consequences, right? The study on this hasn't been enough, but we're seeing that the addiction patterns in social media are essentially the same addiction patterns that we see in mice when we give them sugar. And we all know sugar is one of the most addictive things, right? We might as well just be injecting nicotine like straight into it, because this is where, like, we used to take something which was it was fun. It was kind of, it did connect. It presented a room for collaboration and conversation and a sharing of ideas. And we've really morphed that into, okay, how can we create and give you the most amount of content? So a Mark's going to sit there and scroll for hours and hours and hours, and it's just enough to keep you on, but you're not happy, right? And so this is the problem, I think, with social media and where we are right now. And we're seeing mental health levels and mental health crises happening right now, especially depression, anxiety, ADHD, all of these things, because we have a 200,000-year-old brain, essentially, that's got 6 years to adapt, and it's just not possible. It's just not possible for us to adapt that fast.
And I think there are some studies. We saw a lot of them. There's even a 15-year longitudinal study, and we know the effect of phone use and more addiction and phone addiction. But I think that it's another fundamental flaw of logic of the human being, is that we are always, there's a book called the Debt Denial, or Denial of Debt. I forgot the author. But it's also the concept of, people think that they'll have more time, right? So first of all, you don't know where you're going to die. But even if you're going to die at the latest, which is 90 or 100 years old, you're passing your time on the screen. And then, whoa, what happened, right? I thought I had more time. Well, no. And then, even more than time, now the biggest commodity is not time, it's attention, right? So you might be spending time with your family or your girlfriend or whoever, but you're not really spending time. You're disconnected.
I mean, again, if it provides you if it truly provides happiness, right? If you can put the phone down, you say, like, I don't think I've ever met anybody who's super happy to admit, hey, what did you do last night? Oh, I scrolled on TikTok for 6 hours. It was awesome, right? No, it's always, I scrolled 6 hours on TikTok. I went to bed at 3.
They don't even say 6 hours.
It could be more. But my point is, if it truly makes you happy, like, I don't think anyone's going to judge you for doing something that's going to make you happy, if it doesn't harm anybody else, of course. But most of the time, we're kidding ourselves when we're saying we're having a fun time on these. Like, sure, you'll get the memes and everything and haha every once in a while, but honestly, if you're scrolling through your feed, I want to venture 60 or 70% is ads anyway. So what are you having a really good time watching ads, right? So I think for that's where social media is at for me right now. And you can tell I'm not a big fan of it, because I see what it's doing to my half siblings, and they know it's brain rot and they're happy and proud about it. And you're like, but guys, that's not okay. You're not learning. You're not experiencing. And I'll go back. There are certain apps and things you can do on the phone, which, if you're creative and you're doing video editing and it's making you happy and you're doing certain things, you're creating memories, that's all fine. No one's saying that you should not be on a screen if you're doing something to make you happy.
And that's an intentional, creative use of technology,
that's
right?
A more succinct way of saying it. Correct.
Thanks for the brain rot. Like, they're actually knowing that they're doing something bad, but they're still doing it, right? And then teenagers call themselves screenagers now, right? So all we do is look at screen. We're screenagers. Okay, well, you proud of that? Come on, guys, go and play outside. Make a joke. Trip your buddy. Do something. I don't know.
But it'd be interesting. Will we see a shift? That's my big question. I honestly believe that, from the pure conversations I'm having, when I first met Mark, I think we had a conversation about this as well. It's just there is an immense. I think we're on kind of the precipice where we're also saying, like, okay, it's gone too far in the wrong direction, and people are going to gravitate towards the real. And I think I'm excited for it. If it gets people to be outside in real connections again, I think that's going to make us all mentally more happy.
I think the biggest, like, an example I always think of, like, leading indicator for the direction society's moving in is like dating apps. Like, I think lots of people, getting frustrated with the experience that they're having on dating apps, and like statistically, it's really not in. If you're an average looking guy on a dating app, like, you might as well just like be staring at a wall all day. It's like very big waste of time, even for average men. But you're starting to see these running clubs. I think this over the last couple of years, this trend of like running clubs in big cities, or like, and they've gotten to the point where they're calling them like singles only running clubs. Like, they're pretty explicit with like, hey, come to the running club, because I think people are really, they're desiring this in-person connection with other people. Like, no, I don't want to use Tinder. I don't want to use Bumble. I don't want to use Hinge. I want to meet people in real life, because I'm spending all day in front of a screen working, or I'm just in the office looking on Slack and responding to these messages. And then I go home and I use my phone even more to match with people. No, like, I want to actually have real in-person connections with others. And I read this article a while ago also talking about how there's less of these community spaces nowadays for us to just.
Was it third spaces or something, right? Is the term
third spaces? Yeah, third spaces, exactly. That's the term. There's less of those now, and they're trying to create these artificial communities online. Like, join my community. No, like these don't replace third spaces. They're not they can't supplant them.
Yeah, there is an interesting. I will say this: there is one interesting conversation. I forget who I was. I think it was in the forget where I read it, but essentially it's saying is that what AI will do, which is going to be interesting, is with the ability to auto translate in real time languages. We may see, and if it's done correctly, an explosion in online communities that are based on commonalities. So none of this algorithmic stuff, but if you have a thing in common, you can now connect with somebody who speaks Swahili, Spanish, Mandarin, Vietnamese, Russian, right? All of those can actually talk in real time about something. And I think that's where a positive LLM AI kind of thing would come into. But to your point, hopefully it goes the right way, where, again, I have my doubts there, because again, it's the internet, right? If you're going to find something like that, it's got to get monetized. And then you're going to figure out a way that you make it addicting enough that it's worth the time for people to be on it, right? So anyways, I agree with you 100%, though, is that I really hope that we start seeing a shift, because I think for the mental health crisis, nothing could be better than people really being more in the moment. And I do see that this is a want that's happening. And I think that, some companies are going to kick and fight that it doesn't happen. But I do think that we're kind of on this precipice of a bit of a societal change. I hope, at least.
Yeah, being present, being in the moment, using technology for good. And that's a good example of creative ways to, use language model. Well, I've traveled a lot, so, it's been a long time where you can be in person and Google Translate with the voice and get some conversation with a stranger in a different language. But now online, is that going to be useful? There's also the probably some cultural aspects to it. But that means that Duolingo will not be needed anymore, right? That's
well, the counterpoint there is like, I mean, you guys have traveled quite a bit as well, and I mean, look on the faces of the countries that you go to. If you can say a simple sentence in their language, that's dopamine, right?
Yeah.
That's dopamine. That's a Nana in Italy going, oh my God, this is amazing, right? Let me share this recipe with you.
Yes.
That, I think, is where you get the real connections. And so I do think that there's always room for both. I think it's just as long as people are cognizant about what makes you truly happy, what brings you happiness, not what pretends to bring you happiness. And then a Duolingo is fine, right? Just don't let it consume you. Be your master, essentially, right?
No, I mean, and again, like to make that clear about mental health, but also about technology, right? We're not against any company or any app or anything, It's just that people are not aware that they're doing so many things unintentionally, and then it becomes too far, right? So intentional use of Duolingo, of anything, of pornography, of social media, it's good. So it's when you get stuck, and then you forget that the real humanness is real connection, right? And even like this, we're using again technology, but we're in three different locations, and we get to laugh. And we had Mark and I had meetings before, and we were in costumes because it's Halloween, and we made our marketing team laugh and our interview person laugh. And so, like, even with technology, we can be present and do that, right? So, and that's like the other thing is like the asynchronous versus the synchronous time, right? So now we're sharing this together, and there's also a live audience listening to us, right? So we're creating a moment that is shared by people. When you're scrolling, it's someone who posted something, who wants to get likes, so you're gonna scroll.
Yeah.
People are not they're not having this smile that we're having, right?
Mm-hmm.
There's a lot of consequences to the online behavior for sure. So I think we're coming close to the end of the time.
Right.
Phil, is there anything final notes that you wanted to share, from flow neuroscience, or, things that people can do? I think my favorite point that you mentioned today is, people who are experiencing depression, it's so hard to go just from 0 to 1, just to build up momentum. And that's the most difficult point, is like the impetus, right, to even begin to improve. Because I think, I spoke to a client today about this, and he's worrying about something he had to fix with his RV outside, and he didn't feel like he could do it. And then he stayed up all night thinking about why he didn't fix the RV, and he's just constantly stuck in this analysis paralysis, right? So I think millions of people are in a similar situation where they're just trying to find some sort of momentum, right? They're trying to go from 0 to 1, and I think things like flow can definitely help with that.
Yeah, I mean, this is going to sound a little sales pitchy, so I apologize in advance. But I do think that the technology is advanced. I'll be the first to admit, right? I think there's a stigma around depression, and back in February, I was just going through it, right? I had tendonitis develop in my Achilles, and I'm a big fitness guy, but running was always the outlet, right? You throw on some good old trance or drum and bass, and I could run for an hour, clear my head. It really that was what made me happy. Once I couldn't start running anymore, I couldn't run anymore. It was just all downhill, right? There was no coming out of it. And my wife, being as supportive as she was, just go to the gym, find this, try swimming, try this. People just aren't equipped really to understand depression, like, unless you've gone through it. And I think that's the big thing, is that if you got an ACL tear, or you broke your arm or whatever, I feel like most people are equipped to kind of help you and say things that'll make you feel better. Like, oh, you'll be fine. You're going to be out of it. I've had this. I've done this, right? There's a relationship aspect. It's not like an anti-stigmatization aspect of it. So I think with depression, we're still, anxiety, I would put in there. ADHD is definitely not as stigmatized anymore. Depression is definitely one of the more stigmatized, but statistically speaking, it's 1 out of 10 people, right? In some countries, it's 2 out of 10. So you get a room of 10 people, like a fifth of those people are depressed, right? So again, it's more common than you think. It's not the end of the world. If you're mild, moderate, severe, there's treatments and there's help for all of those. And if you're interested in flow, like I said, we have a extremely generous return policy, which allows you to see whether it works in the first 3 weeks. This is also part of this neuromodulation thing that we have. But essentially, we've tried to do it the most ethical way possible to try to get depression treatment into as many hands as possible, to allow people to do it at home without medication. And if they're doing it with a doctor or in a clinic, it's still possible they can work together with their doctor to do it. And I think the main message here, to leave it on a high note, is that there is light at the end of the tunnel. You can get past it, right? You can figure out, you will find a zest for life, but you do have to take the first step, is the hardest. But then you start training yourself to see that all the success that you've made, if I look at where I was in February to where I am now, different person, right? And those are the stories that you have ever. And it's not just me. I can't tell you who our clientele is, but there's some big names in there. Wink, wink. But anyways, like, we're talking like athletes and actors, right? Like, these people are seeking the help. We've made it accessible. So just because if they can take the help, or if they can admit that they're going through this, I think you can for yourself as well.
Well, I really wish that people who think that they need it get, what type of help they can seek, admit, start to, it's not like really remove the stigma, right? We talked about depression being a stigma. Addiction is another big stigma, as we know, right? But no more stigma, guys. No judgment. Just to try to be healthier, mental health, and we have solutions. Thanks, Phil, for bringing this to to our attention that there are some, futuristic looking or old solutions that make people happier and less depressed. And you said that it might sound selfish. It didn't. It actually sounded like it's true, and people can have some help. But talking about pitching, anyone that's a baseball fan, I think it's tonight the World Series that Toronto might win it. So anyone that's
Please beat the Dodgers.
yeah.
I lived in LA too long.
Any parting words, Mark?
Phil, thank you so much for doing this with us. It was a pleasure. It's always insightful whenever I get a chance to speak with you. Tell us quickly, where can people find out more about Flow and what Flow's doing?
Yeah, sure. Flowneuroscience.com for most of the English-speaking world. Flowneuroscience.de for Dach. Everything's on there. We have the doctor portal. If you're a doctor or clinician interested in using this in your practice, there's a doctor link as well at the top that you can get information on how you can integrate it into your treatment. Thanks for having me, guys. It was really great. I hope we can do it again sometime.
Absolutely.
Danke schön, Phil.
Danke. Happy Halloween, everyone. See you next time.
Happy Halloween. Bye,
Thanks
guys.
for joining. Have a great day.
See you.